Hello, my name is Eric Follick. I'm a Platonist contemplative ascetic and renunciant. I would like to read for you an essay that I wrote called What is to be Done. If you would like to read the original print version of this, it's available at both of my other internet venues at Platonist asceticism platonist.blogspot.com. That's platonistasceticism.blogspot.com and independent.academia.edu/Eric Follick with a capital E and a capital F and no space. And that's ERIC F as in Frank, ALLICK. So again, that's independent.academia.edu/Eric Follick. Okay, so here we go with my reading the essay. What is to be Done by Eric S. Follick, that's me. And it begins with a quote from Plotinus from Ennead 1:4 on eudaimonia, chapter 16, lines 21 to 24. This is my own translation, as is the little quotation from the Phaedrus at the end. So this quotation goes, or excerpt goes, so that for him some acts will be contributing towards blessedness, that's a rendering of eudaimonia, but some will not be for the sake of the goal, that is the telos, and won't be of him at all, but for the thing being yoked together with him, which he will take thought for and bear while it is possible. And that's the end of the quote. So here starts the essay proper. For many thousands of lifetimes over countless eons, throughout the long dark night of time, we have been undergoing repeated rebirths in all sorts of forms, human and non-human, in the beginningless and endless cycle of genesis, becoming, samsara, birth and death, individuated sensate existence in space-time. By the way, the Greek word genesis is the equivalent in Greek of the Sanskrit samsara. It means becoming. This is nothing but darkness and non-being, pure and constant misery and unsatisfactoriness and impermanence. It is nothing but separation from the good, the experience of multiplicity and individuality instead of the experience of the one. This in itself is the most horrible intrinsic suffering and falling and undesirable state. Intrinsic in the sense that this is the most horrible suffering, regardless of specific events that may occur. Just the very fact of being in becoming is pretty awful. Now we have the extremely rare and precious opportunity to implement and follow the path to liberation, to reunion with the One, to release forever from the cycle of rebirth and all the intended inherent pain of individuated spatio-temporal sensate existence. To not make the most of this opportunity, to be concerned about and devoted to the ephemeral and momentary and worthless things of this world instead, is the most foolish and tragic thing possible. Nothing else at all matters in this world in this brief life. Our only concern is striving towards the goal of release and return. In this world, the only thing that actually determines whether someone is blessed, well off, in a good condition, happy or not, is the distance or closeness of the soul to or from the one or the good, and with it the progress towards or regression from release from becoming. Everything else that goes on in the world or that people experience is really ultimately trivial and unimportant. The only real distinction to view among people is between those aspiring for and working towards reunion with the One and release from samsara, and those who are not, between those who have renounced this world for the absolute and those who have not. So, apart from this, all the goings on and news and problems and sufferings and so forth that we see, and hear about in this world are really meaningless and indistinct. Just more and more endless samsara and just another unvarying drop in the bucket of becoming. The specific details don't really mean anything from this broader and more general and truer perspective. Of course, some people are creating better mundanely good karma, and some, most perhaps, are creating bad. Really, almost everyone is creating bad that we see in day to day. And the good will be happier than the bad in a mundane sense, but it is all still just endless turning of the wheel. Only someone aspiring for the path in some way is really significant. The only thing worth doing in this world is turning from it and working on the way. However, alas, we also have to maintain this skin bag, the body, and psychophysical organism and mind to the minimum extent necessary so that we can continue in the ascesis. Ascesis means the ascetic practice. Given this state of affairs, the way things are, there are only two legitimate, acceptable, real reasons for doing anything, for any act or action or thought or word. Either it is part of contemplative ascetic practice, is part of traveling on the path, leads to and makes progress towards liberation from birth and death, to return to the good, to the end of individuation, to the telos, towards the end, towards the goal of release and reunion. Or it is necessary, really necessary, to maintain one's existence, to maintain body and mind, to maintain the psychophysical organism, to continue to live in the mundane sense in a reasonable manner so that we can continue the ascesis. That is, just to survive minimally. Everything else, every and any other motivation, every other act is proscribed, illegitimate, and deadly foolishness. Of course, this is not easy to implement. It is probably especially difficult in the beginning and early stages of the practice, when withdrawal from sensual pleasures and worldly activities and interests is new and still ongoing, and capability for and power of practice is still undeveloped. Also, some people may have various worldly obligations, duties, commitments, and burdens that they took on before they raised the aspiration for the way in this birth, and which have, of course, to be discharged properly with due righteousness and dutifulness. It is fairly clear what acts constitute the contemplative ascetic practice and fall under the first criterion. But the difficulty lies in accurately and honestly discerning what are the really necessary actions under the second criterion of mere survival, in accordance with one's individual capacities and abilities and circumstances, and having the awareness and presence of mind and discipline and determination to act according to such correct discernment of what is minimally necessary for psychophysical survival and adequate functioning to optimally maintain the ascesis. The activities that constitute the actual contemplative ascetic practice that fall under the first criterion, that belong to the true higher soul, that lead to the goal and release and reunion, that are real include all aspects of ascetic withdrawal and practice, the actual practice of formal sitting in contemplation, the main thrust of our actual practice, spiritual reading and study, and as ancillary for those capable of it, language study to learn ancient Greek to be able to actually read the primary spiritual texts, such as the dialogues and enneads, the reading of which constitutes a form of auxiliary contemplation and for which translations are inadequate, and possibly sharing and discussion with true spiritual friends, if you can find any here in the depths of the modern Kali Yuga. Not at all an easy thing. That's it. The minimum actions that are merely necessary for psychophysical survival, for maintaining mind and body in good condition to serve for the contemplative ascetic practice proper, that don't really belong to the higher self or soul and the sage, that don't directly conduce to liberation, in fact, are rolling around in the region of non-being and aren't really real, are not always quite so clear, especially in the circumstances of the present day. Obviously, what ones are really necessary include eating and food and water. By the way, water is actually the only thing that's necessary to drink. Uh, Anything else is like, tea or soda or something is just unnecessary extravagance. And of course, subsequent excretion, sleeping, clothing, housing, some exercise, health care, including dental and vision care, bathing and washing, and other forms of hygiene, and so forth. These generally require some money, and so working is generally required to earn it and is included here, um, unless people have some other means of support or savings or retirement or something. Uh, um, I'm still working. The rub here is that exactly how much and what form of each of these things is required and how they are best obtained and done varies and depends on the individual's capability and capacity and ability and given physical and mental and emotional karmic factory equipment and individual situation and circumstances. Always, though, of course, we are talking about only the minimum necessary of such things, with no luxury and no regard for sensual pleasure or enjoyment or the opinion of worldlings or social expectations or etc. We're talking about an ascetic's way, a renunciant's way of uh, just what they need to survive, and that's it. Thus, each individual has to discern and decide these for themselves and their circumstances, based on a sound understanding of ascetic and spiritual principle and contemplative, ascetic and spiritual and contemplative principles, and consultation with the spiritual text, and if and when possible, again, probably not often possible, with true ascetic spiritual friends. This can often be unclear and difficult to ascertain, and an ongoing process of discernment and adjustment. Nonetheless, these basic items needed for minimal physical survival, in consonance with proper ascetic poverty and renunciation and conduct, are comparatively clear. One thing that is obviously and most uncompromisingly clear is that the discharging and obtaining of these physical necessities must always be done in the most scrupulously righteous, honest, and non-harming, and of course this means vegan in food, clothing, shoes, accessories, medicines, personal care products, etc., manner, no matter what. This can't be compromised, even if it were to mean not having necessities and dying. truly, truly, you cannot ever uh, violate the canons of righteousness and not harming for any uh, worldly attainment or obtaining anything or any worldly purpose. What is even more difficult to discern and understand, however, is what activities and to what extent are permissible for maintaining one's mental and emotional state in a condition suitable for the contemplative ascetic practice, including how much and in what sense it is necessary to refresh and rest the mind and emotions, and as something resembling, quote, recreation, for lack of a better word, and how much and what sort of people contact is necessary to avoid excessive depression and anxiety and mental distortion. It is, of course, being assumed here that fully committed and devoted celibate, brahmacharya, solitary, vegan, teetotaling, contemplative, etc., renunciants, and ascetics are being addressed here. That the practitioner has to discern at any given stage of practice just how hard they can practice in a sustained manner with out undue emotional and mental disruption, how much social isolation they can handle, and how much time they have to that is necessary to devote, however unwillingly, to a little mental, emotional, and human rest and refreshment, and by what means they can properly fulfill this reluctant need. Some means are obviously proscribed and not acceptable. Movies, television, fiction, popular music, worldly social events, excessive reading or viewing or hearing of the news, social action, political activities, premeditated socializing with worldlings, etc. Those who still have family obligations and commitments may not be able to avoid all family functions and gatherings and so forth. They will have to decide and discern about this on a case by case basis in their own individual situation. Acceptable forms of, quote, recreation may be such as reading various works of and about ascetics and spiritual understandings and practices in different systems, and maybe like idealist philosophical works, if that's helpful, or depending on where one's at. And which can be helpful for company and encouragement as well as relaxation, and can also sometimes provide helpful ancillary knowledge and background. Discussing such, if you can somehow find anybody now with whom to do so, or who at least likes to hear about it. Walking outdoors, which also provides the needed exercise to maintain the physical body. Watching videos about ascetics in different systems on the internet, or or maybe some monastics talking about related subjects or things like that. Reading outside, weather permitting. Researching about veganism and acceptable products and how to manage doing least harm, such as also to the environment, and learning about the intelligence and sensitivity of animals, which goes along with having understanding and arguments in favor of veganism, and so forth. Things that that would, in a way, be ancillary to the ascesis. The hardest thing probably is the problem of social isolation in the circumstances of the present day in which we find ourselves. Ideally, all ordinary human social contact that is necessary, all the needs for human contact, to keep from going crazy and being over tense at any given stage and progress on the path, would be provided by interaction with true ascetic spiritual friends. the only other people truly and really worth having anything to do with. These are hard to find even in the best of times and circumstances, but now are especially rare, and one can hardly count on this being available at present, especially since we're not in a structured or cenobitical monastic environment. Though even in that environment, it would be very hard to find true people um, to interact with. Uh, so we can hardly count on this as being available and present. So what to do? Of course, premeditated socializing and attending social events with ordinary worldlings is out of the question. In the absence of spiritual friends or enough spiritual friends, probably about the best one can do for a little human contact is to get by with just brief, unplanned, casual encounters with people one meets or has to meet with in the course of discharging the other necessary actions: neighbors, co-workers, housemates, passersby, fellow passengers on public transportation, etc. Those still with family relationships they can't get out of too much can include interaction with family, which may be more than too much for this purpose. It may be all or more than you need. One has to be careful, especially early on in the ascesis, not to be sucked into and influenced by their worldly views, attitudes, understandings, opinions, advice, and acts. But hopefully, it is very difficult. This can be done. One can get a little human contact of however an undesirable sort without too much harm and come out largely unscathed. Let us hope so. One can try to talk to them about what one actually does and is an ascetic, however uncomprehending they may be. And actually, it can be very painful to talk to them since they're uncomprehending and have an attitude and direction totally the opposite of ours. Not ideal, but maybe the only option possible. It is important to note that interaction with bad, false, alleged spiritual friends is actually an even worse option. Casually talking and interacting with chance worldlings, one can more easily distance oneself from them, recognize their foolishness and evil, admonish oneself not to be like them, protect oneself by talking about such things as veganism, and turn to the writings and records of the ancient true practitioners for inspiration of guidance, to the, quote, community of saints, unquote, as it were. But with bad supposed spiritual friends and false ascetics or non-ascetics, as they say, wolves in sheep's clothing, and such are mostly all there are these days, including even in institutionalized monastic settings, such as may remain in any of the systems. One is liable to be subtly drawn in and misled by their sophistries and fall from the way. The key in this matter is first to understand and accept and commit and be devoted to the principle outlined here, that there are only two acceptable and legitimate and justifiable reasons for doing anything. Either because it is part of contemplative ascetic practice and leads to reunion with the good and liberation from birth and death, or because it is indispensably necessary to maintain psychophysical survival in this birth. That is it, only those two possible reasons. Next, with understanding and discernment of what is necessary to honestly assess one's own motivations in performing any act or doing anything. Is it really necessary if it is not part of the ascesis? Or is it really because of remaining worldly desires and interests and habits? Lastly, to discern as best as possible what really is absolutely necessary in any doing in this world, apart from the contemplative ascetic practice, and to do only that regardless of the latent habits and desires of the lower defiled worldly self. Every act we do either moves us further on the path to the telos, if we choose wisely, or binds us further to the wheel of birth and death and creates more suffering samsaric karma. Really, just you're going up or you're going down. In everything we do, we must try to discern as best as we can which this action is and be honest as to our motivation and what we are doing, and with great discipline, enthusiasm, love, effort, and joy, always try to take the upward path. Why was this essay written? Quote, "But the gardens and writings, as it seems, he will both sow and will write for the sake of play, whenever he would write, storing up reminders both for himself, if he should come to the, quote, forgetting of old age, unquote, and for everyone following the same track." That's from Phaedrus 276, D1 to 4. So there you have it. That is my essay that I've just written, and I hope it's of some help to any sincere practitioners out there. And I hope the principle is clear, and that it's clear how incredibly serious a matter it is what we do in this birth. This may be our only opportunity for a long time if we don't use it wisely, and the stakes are as high as imaginable, could be imagined. It's either we, everything we do can either lead us forward on the path, or if we act like worldlings, motivated by just the lower self, it can create more karma and keep us more bound. Again, it's not an easy thing, and it's not that there won't be many lapses on our part, and that continuing really until we attain liberation, pretty much. So there's no need to be discouraged, and as I mentioned at the end, we can pursue all this happily with joy, because it's such a wonderful thing that we have, and we're so fortunate compared to all the countless sentient beings who have no clue and are just wandering and bobbing endlessly in the sea of birth and death. So we have this great opportunity. It's wonderful, and we can approach it with joy, but also with discipline and great effort and care, and continue to march on. Okay. So no matter what, and if you stumble, just get up and keep going again. Anyway, thank you for watching this, and I hope it is helpful and you enjoyed it. Okay, thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.